Discuss our proposal. I yield 4 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly.
Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my distinguished friend from Massachusetts, and I also thank his able staff for the incredible work they're doing. I want to talk about the bill before us, the EPA Science Advisory Board, but also I want to talk about Mr. McGovern's amendment on Russia. And they actually are linked. Because the last time a great power decided to deny science-based policy and to actually dictate politically what was science and what wasn't was Stalin's Soviet Russia. Famous scientist named Lysenko, who turned out to be a fraud and a con artist, but for 30 years, his thinking dominated Soviet science to the detriment of the Soviet people. It actually led to a famine in the Ukraine, killing millions of people because he insisted on his brand, his political brand of science, agricultural science, which wasn't science at all. My friend from Massachusetts, I think, is wrong when he says, what's the emergency? I don't think he understands that from the Republican point of view, science mixed with public policy is an emergency. We have to do something about it. The world was created 4,273 years ago, and carbon dating is a fraud. Climate change, as your coastal areas are underwater, think about the comfort of Republican philosophy. It's just a theory, and disputable at that. And by the way, let's defund any research on it. Let's back out of our commitments. Let's be the only major nation in the world that denies that climate change is real and is going to affect us in almost every aspect of our lives moving forward, including our children and their children. We owe them better. That's the emergency. God forbid the Environmental Protection Agency have policies and regulations that are science-based. God forbid we look at empirical research to guide us in making thoughtful policies to protect the public. God forbid we look at the science of lead and other toxins in water supplies. Let's save $7 million in Flint, Michigan. Just today they announced a $100 million settlement. That anti-scientific decision, that political decision, put the people of Flint, Michigan at risk, and is now going to cost $100 million to fix. That's the consequences of an anti-empirical philosophy, and that will be the consequence of polluting this board with corporations and corporate representatives who are guilty of polluting in the first place. Of course they won't welcome regulation of their own respective industries, and the Republicans are their enablers. That's what's going to happen if this bill passes. With respect to Russia, each day there are more troubling revelations that make clear senior-level Trump officials had undisclosed contact with Russian officials about the campaign, perhaps, and the transition, and about sanctions. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was fired after only 3 weeks on the job for lying about this very thing to the Vice President of the United States. Attorney General Jeff Sessions had to recuse himself from any Russian probe because of compromised testimony at his nomination hearing. FBI Director James Comey confirmed an investigation into the Trump campaign's possible collusion with Russian officials. And what's been the most visible reaction from my friends on the other side of the aisle in this Congress? The frenetic behavior of the intelligence department that has seemingly compromised the committee's ability to investigate. This ought not to be about partisan politics. It ought to be about restoring congressional independence and integrity, one of our most cherished democratic institutions, in fact, the most cherished, a free election without foreign interference. So I support Mr. McGovern's potential amendment. I will also oppose the previous question, and I yield back to my good friend from Massachusetts.